the faith.
This is the way. Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Tells me when you'll love this.
Hello, critics, non-critics, and friends. Welcome to the Film Optix podcast, where we take a glance into blockbusters, indie films, and everything in between. I'm your host, Christian, and I'm joined by my good friend / my co-host, Devin, alongside Mr. Michael Thomas from the Chatter After / Collider / Amateur Otaku podcast. And today we're going to be sharing our views and insights on the 5th episode of HBO's original series, The Last of Us, which is titled Endure and Survive. And before we begin today's episode, you can listen to our podcast on podcast platforms around the internet. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. And if you are a new or seasoned listener to the show, we would love to hear from you guys. Follow us on Instagram and follow us on Twitter at Film Optix. That is Optix with an X. Or you can email us at filmoptix@gmail.com for any movie-related question. Gentlemen, how's everyone's week been? It's been insane, especially with this episode. So let's first welcome back Mr. Mike Thomas, coming back to the channel once again.
Thank you. It is an honor to be back. So happy that we get to do this early. Thank you, Rihanna, for forcing them to push this episode to Friday instead of Sunday. I can't wait to talk about it. This was an intense one for sure.
Well said.
Is it better to be emotionally terrorized on a Friday night than a Sunday night? I guess.
I think so.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah, get it out of the way, and then you kind of just, you go about your business. But Mr. Devin, how have you been, buddy?
I jumped back into the Harry Potter world last night. That was fun. And then I watched this episode last night. That was a roller coaster. They gave us 1 week off. They gave us a 1 week break from the emotional wreck that this show causes.
Yeah. Hey, we all knew it was happening. We're all gamers here. So we were kind of just, if you're playing the game again as you're watching the show, it's like a double whammy. But yeah, it just hits different with television. We're able to.
It hits so much harder.
Yeah, especially the way how they adapt everything, which is insane. But Devin, for the listeners out there, what is your Hogwarts house in Hogwarts Legacy?
I mean, the main character energy, Gryffindor.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Ravenclaw, but actually I'm a Slytherin, so yeah, it is what it is. But hey, literally since I've had when Pottermore was a thing, now it's called thewizardingworld.com. The first thing you could do is get sorted into your house. You ask all those questions, and it came up as a Slytherin. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to embrace this.
I learned last night that Rupert Grint is actually a Hufflepuff. He took the test and got Hufflepuff.
Yes, he is. Yes, he really, really is. There's a huge forum out there where people are building the case why Hermione Granger should have been a Ravenclaw outside of a Gryffindor, but I don't agree with that. But it is what it's a pretty interesting case. People are using a lot of different just a lot of different instances between Hermione in the books and then in the movies and whatnot. But yeah, it looks like, both of us are on the Harry Potter train. I rolled credits on Tomb Raider 2013 for the first time. Finally getting around to my backlog. I know the Steam Deck is helping me get through my backlog because I would buy games on Steam and then something else would come out. I'm like, ooh, I want to play that. And I just never got around to the Tomb Raider games, but I rolled credits on Tomb Raider 2013. It was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Great game.
Great game. Definitely going to be going through the Tomb Raider trilogy there, but Hogwarts is a calling. So I wanted to finish Tomb Raider before dropping into Hogwarts Legacy. But as we have mentioned before, this is our episode 5 review of The Last of Us. Again, that is titled Endure and Survive. We're going to be getting into our initial reactions first and foremost, which is our non-spoiler section. For all of you new listeners out there, welcome to the show. Then we're going to get into our spoiler section and give a few Tilu trivia facts along the way. Some that we kind of just picked up, or that some that we know from the differences from the games to the TV show. Then we're going to give our final thoughts and our ratings, and then we'll say our final goodbyes. So with all that out of the way, we'll be right back after this introduction to The Last of Us Episode 5. And we are back with our The Last of Us Episode 5. Again, that is titled Endure and Survive. And you might be thinking why we're effectively getting 2 episodes, Episode 4 and Episode 5, within the same week. It is because of the Super Bowl. And I think this was a very nice touch that HBO decided to go with this decision, not only moving it to the Friday before the Super Bowl, but also keeping in strict continuity with the timetable, which is not releasing Episode 5 until 8 p.m. Eastern. No, 8 p.m. Central. Sorry, I'm Central Time. So I thought that was phenomenal. You know, they didn't pull the Netflix card where it's like, hey, you know, we're just going to release the episode at the crack of dawn, and then everyone's just going to be spoiling it all day. Like, I really appreciate how not Netflix, sorry. I really appreciate how HBO has handled this altogether. So we're going to get into our initial reactions here. I'm going to pass it over to Mike so he can give his initial reactions on Episode 5. Then we'll go to Devin and then myself.
Yeah, well, like you just said, it was really awesome that they dropped this episode on Friday, right? Because, like, they could have released it on Monday or Tuesday after, but they gave it to us early, which was nice of them. This was an interesting watch for me because I've mentioned it before, but I had to do the season review earlier. So this is the first episode where on my screeners it said visual effects are not complete. And so this was a vastly different experience watching it, seeing how good the clickers and bloaters look in the final moments of this episode. Like I'm not going to spoil it. We'll talk about that in spoiler moments, but there's one that was actually really funny. But yeah, I really loved this episode because it handles Henry and Sam's story perfectly. Like, I thought that we're going to have to split that up into 2 different episodes, right? Like, with their introduction and then ultimately the conclusion of their story in like the next episode or next week. But they were able to incorporate that with this Hunter's storyline, with the sniper storyline and all that great stuff in one singular narrative, which I think was really cool, especially Kathleen. I thought she was a great addition. You know, we were kind of wondering where they were going to take her when they introduced her, since she was an original character. And I think for me, this is what cements this is one of the best adaptations of all time, right? Because they were able to take things from the game. For the first few episodes, they were really following it 1-to-1, but then episode 3, they revamp Bill and Frank. And then in this episode, they take things that we know and add new elements original to the show to create an entirely new experience. And for me, I think it actually turned out better here than it did in the video game, which is astonishing.
Oh, that is a very hot take. Okay, we'll dive into that here in a little bit. But Devin, what are your initial reactions to this week's episode?
Yeah, that was my take after the first episode, that I think they're doing it better than the game as far as the story goes, and it's looking good so far. My prediction is definitely holding up 5 episodes in. This episode just kind of wrecks you emotionally. I've watched 2 videos on it since watching it last night. I watched the after show podcast with Troy Baker, which was an hour long. It's definitely a longer one because so how important this episode is. And in both, and I also watched the new Rockstars Easter egg breakdown on it, and in both of those videos, the hosts of them, they just started to break down towards the end, like just the emotional toll that it takes when they're talking about it. Troy Baker and Eric Voss just shows just the moments that can hit in this show, and how important it is to just show that side of humanity, and it just hits so different in the show. If I feel like, because in the game, Sam and Henry was always a memorable moment, very obviously so. After you've seen what happens to them, it's heartbreaking, and they carry that forward into the show so beautifully. I think it was very interesting that they went with a deaf actor and made Sam a deaf person in this show. I was listening to the podcast, the after show podcast, and Craig Mazin mentioned that when they were trying to cast Sam, they had a very specific casting call, which was like an 8 to 12-year-old black deaf kid who knows ASL. So that's obviously a very hard thing to find, because that's a lot of boxes to check. So apparently he went to Twitter and just kind of asked just if anybody could play the role, and he got 5 responses apparently, and Kayvon Woodard was one of them, and he was the best by far. And I thought he was just incredible in this episode. Just the emotions he was able to pull off, just showing everything that you can't put into words, but you can tell the emotions that he's having throughout the episode. And his relationship with Ellie was amazing. Ellie just kind of understanding the temperature of the room, and realizing that Sam just needs a friend at this moment, and she gets the job done. It's just, there's so much that happens. There's so much action. There's so much emotion all wrapped into one episode. It's amazing.
I definitely agree with both of you guys. When it came to this episode, like I said before, us being gamers, we know where the story is headed, but again, they take a different path to get to the same results. And I was like tearing up like this entire episode, like obviously knowing what's going to happen, but the way that this episode usually, like Mike said, it's been kind of beat for beat up until episode 3, but they also said this on the After Show podcast. I haven't had a chance to finish it, but I'm about halfway through, because like Devin said, it's an hour long, which what I was not expecting. I was trying to squeeze it in here before we started recording, and I started watching Heavy Spoilers review as well. But when it comes to this episode, there are a lot of video game Easter eggs that are in service to gamers, which is really nice. When you have the 2 protectors, when it came to them finding the underground, I guess you can say like not nursery, but the underground like stronghold where a lot of kids
tunnel.
I hate you so much, Mike. Oh, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. It applies even today. That show has aged like fine wine.
Shout out to my editor, Therese, because on my Collider article, I named that Easter egg Secret Tunnels, and she left it in.
Shout out to the editor. That's awesome. That is fantastic. It's like, what's this? It's like, people will know.
They'll know. I'm kidding.
They'll know. Water Tribe. It's fine. But getting back to the episode, it was, it put like this somber smile on my face, because, we get to see Ellie interact with someone else who is roughly around her age. In the games, Sam and Ellie are, I think Sam is like 13 in the games, and then Ellie's 14.
Yeah, they're a year apart.
Yeah. So it was nice to have that interactiveness, but it's also a foil between Joel and Ellie, and then you have Sam and Henry, which, I mean, they both killed it. Like, I was so like, obviously, we have Nick Offerman playing as Bill, but I was really interested to see who they're going to choose for Sam and Henry, and it blew me away. Like this episode's like an hour long, and you get to see this. There's a lot of action in this episode, probably the most we've seen, but also, with the change up with them being in Kansas, and then Henry being like the most wanted man, they're giving more backstory to Sam and Henry, because in the games, you run into them, but they're, trying to meet up with people at a radio tower, and things kind of look up for a bit. We have this nice little four-man squad all together, like you have Henry, who knows everything about Kansas City and how everything is run and how this rebellion group overthrew Fedra. And it makes you wonder, like, what Fedra was necessarily doing. But it's always weird with Fedra, because on one hand, they did establish order after the outbreak, and they did set up these QZ zones, but it's not as perfect as people were hoping. But then again, you have these rebellion groups who try to overthrow Fedra, and it looks like as if nothing has changed, especially with Kathleen's brother, who we'll talk more about in spoilers. But yeah, overall, I'm going to stop ranting here because I can go all day, but I absolutely love this episode. Every single episode so far has been like just pretty much just perfect. But this one, I think, hits the hardest because it shows how far humanity has gone down this hole, or this point of no return, because of the infected. And we haven't seen the infected in a while, but at least in hives. And we finally get to see, it's a nice reminder, like, hey, they're still here. Just because we haven't ran into them in a while, they are still here. But, the clickers and the infected altogether in the game, they are the obstacle, but they're still just as scary. No tendrils this episode, but we do get a little, a little mini infected person running around. But we'll talk about that in spoilers. But I wanted to pass it back over to you guys. If there's anything else you wanted to talk about in our non-spoiler section before we hit spoilers.
Endure and survive.
As far as non-spoilers, no.
Fair enough. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get into our spoiler section of The Last of Us episode 5, which is titled Endure and Survive, which has a stronger meaning than just the title of the show, which we'll get into in spoilers. So that is your first spoiler warning for episode 5 of The Last of Us Again. That is your second spoiler warning for this episode. So if you have not seen it, definitely go watch it. Well, first, you need to get a box of tissues and then go watch it because you're going to need it for sure. So we are finally in our spoiler section, and where we last left off in episode 4, we kind of see the lead up to how Sam and Henry meet up or run into Joel and Ellie. We start to see this, they're on the run. They are the two, or it's more so Henry, but Sam's kind of like the indirect accomplice.
Sam is definitely younger in the show than in the game, which is, I think, a really cool decision to make. It gives Ellie kind of the insight into what it's like to be kind of a guardian or parent, someone seeking and looking over and looking after someone that's reliant on them. It gives her that insight, which is really smart.
That is true. And I love how, I believe it was in the after show, like, little snippet that they do towards the end of every episode, where when they decided to make Sam deaf, which is great for, deaf representation. We've seen a lot of that within recent years, but overall there hasn't been as many. But it's great that, they saw an opportunity and they rolled with it, and it worked out phenomenally. And I hope that, I believe his name is Kevon. I believe, yeah. So I really hope that he, is, people see this and he starts getting, into more roles, because he was phenomenal. His sign language was like extremely fluid, and I was very, very impressed with all of that. But we, I think last week, I think Mike had said how Joel had like rolled over like to like his bad ear when it came to the glass. situation. And I thought it was pretty interesting just to kind of see it play out with Sam and Henry, where obviously, since Sam's death, he doesn't realize how much noise he's making. And so it kind of adds that extra layer of protection where Henry has to, obviously, Sam is his brother, but Henry has to take extra care of him, especially in this world, because he is put at a huge disadvantage, which adds an interesting layer.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to highlight Lamar Johnson as Henry, right? Because he does a fantastic job here as well. You instantly buy the relationship he has with his younger brother, Sam. And I like how he is serving as a protector, but he does tell Joel straight up, I've never hurt anyone. The closest I've ever come to was pointing a gun at Ellie's head, that same day. And so I think that relationship...
A not loaded gun.
A not loaded gun too, right? Yeah. But I think that relationship that he develops with Joel, I think is equally as interesting as Ellie's relationship with Sam. And that makes what happens at the end even so much more devastating because, again, as soon as Joel gets somewhat familiar or close to someone, tragedy strikes. And the same thing with Ellie. Ellie, everyone she's come in contact with has either died or suffered a great loss. And it's as we move further along, I think we're getting an idea of what loss actually is. Keep bringing up the joke, but I really love what they did with these characters. And I really love what Melanie Lynskey did as Kathleen, right? And seeing how that all kind of comes together. The performances really land when it comes to these new characters that they introduced. Her and Perry, I think, were very fascinating antagonists. And I love how all of this, you start to see the bigger picture, right? Because in the game, Bill helps Joel and Ellie escape. They fight a bloater. Cool. That's a very video game trope where we run into a new NPC, they help us on our journey, and we move on. But by not having Bill there and having the bloater moved here, it just makes it way more intense and chaotic. And it's not as gamey, right? Where every time we meet a new character, we end up in a new mission. It's we just teaming up with Sam and Henry because we didn't have that interaction with Bill. And it makes it feel a little bit more organic. But that's just me.
No, I totally agree. When it comes to, introducing the stages of the infected to a new audience through television, I think moving the bloater here was amazing. There was usually in the game, when you kill a bloater, there's a reason why it's called a bloater. It explodes. But there was a few nice touches when the bloater kills Perry. He rips his head off the same way as if you get caught by a bloater. The same thing happens in the game, or half, because it kind of, cuts and it says, oh, you died. But you start to see the effect. Yeah. Wasted.
I love how tall they made the bloater. He is just massive sprinting at how tall the bloater is.
That was all practical, correct? There was someone actually in that suit.
Yeah, his name is Adam Basil. He was also in Beauty and the Beast, The Northman, and Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Looks like he was playing motion capture for Venom.
That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, yeah. To your point, I think moving the bloater here, because it just adds that extra level of, there's a new type of infected out there. It's they come up from the ground and just in hives, but then which Kathleen and her team, or the rebels, have kind of failed to attend to, because it was really more Fedra driving them underground. But when you see the bloater just coming out, and then it's oh my gosh, there's infected, but then there's something else that is just as scary, but in a way it is terrifying. It's more terrifying because
that slow motion shot was just so cool.
Yeah. And it's like
Yeah.
no one knows what to do. Like everyone's just shooting at this thing, hoping it'll die. And it's this, this thick skin, someone who's been infected for a very long time. And you start to see how, like Devin said, they move super fast, which is still insane to me. And it's 10 times scarier in the game because, you have to fight these things. And don't even get me started on part 2. But I'm not, that's all I'm going to say about part 2. But when it comes to the bloaters, it is, wow. Like, job well done introducing all of that. And also with the, I wanted to bring up, I find it was interesting that obviously in the game, we never really got to see kids that were infected prior to what happened to Sam. Because the only real infected kid that we see in the video game is
I've definitely never seen a kid clicker before. Like that's insane.
That was
So, okay, story time. That is one of the not finished effects from my screener. And I'm like, I couldn't tell if that scene was supposed to be funny or tragic because it was just this weird little child devil that just attacks Kathleen. No. And I'm just like, was her death supposed to be played for laughs or was it supposed to be scary? And so seeing the finished product, it's definitely supposed to be scary, but like the not finished CG and like the movements were very jank. It felt like, oh yeah, this is The Last of Us on PS1. And that was a very funny experience.
I know what you mean by like unfinished effects. When I was sent the Raised by Wolves season 2 screeners and they had put like a big disclaimer saying that not all effects are finished, it made the show that much funnier because you actually got to see that like a lot of the special effects were not finished. But I had to like you had to go back and rewatch the episode once those effects were completed, and it just made me chuckle because it just looks so funny. Like, I know obviously, they're still working on it, but yeah, I just thought that was hilarious.
The idea of a kid clicker is also just so like sad because how long does it take before you become a clicker? Is it 1 year?
I guess in the show they did have that. Well, they had the chart of how fast or how long it takes for someone to become infected. But yeah, you would be you'll be infected. That would turn you into a runner, I believe it was. And then there's like a stage between clicker and runner, I think it was. And then after clicker,
Stalker.
It's bloater. Stalker. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, so it would be you're infected, then you turn into a runner, stalker, clicker.
But just to think
bloater.
this kid was so young and then became infected, and then she's even to this point where she's a clicker. They did a very good job. I think she was like a professional gymnast, just the way she was able to move around all creepily.
She was Spider-Maning everywhere.
Yes.
I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
In the game, yeah, Devin's right. You become a clicker after a year. In the show, the timetable of everything was accelerated because you get infected and you like immediately turn into a runner after like a day. So a clicker, there's no official timetable, but that's probably like a month or two with how fast they're turning in the show. So yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That was I think I was more afraid of that child clicker than I was a bloater. I was like, this is not fun. This is not fun whatsoever.
That bloater sure didn't look fun when he took our buddy Perry's head off.
R.I.P. dude. I was like,
Tommy / Perry.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that they showed him his head being ripped off, but it was more so in the background. But it was still a nice, touch of detail.
Apparently, Craig Mazin originally wanted to be like a split, like completely in half from like the waist. That was the original one they tried, but it just didn't really come off right. Like, wasn't very realistic, I guess.
No, you got to give the bloaters their credit where credit is due. That's their signature style. It's ripping off people's their jaws to their oof. I can't even think about it. It is crazy. But I wanted to actually talk about the title of the episode, which is endure and survive, which is from the comic. I believe the name of the entire comic was Savage Starlight, or is that the name of the issue? I can't remember.
That's
The comic, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I love how, you have Sam and Ellie. Obviously, they're bonding, but they're bonding over comic books. And that is a big part of Ellie's character in the game, which, of course, shows up here in the show, much like her pun book. And I like how they were able to bond over that by talking about, which issues do you have? And it's not necessarily like they can just go to a comic book store or go to like a toy store like they did in the game. But, Sam doesn't have the robots altogether that happens in the game versus what he uses to communicate and the things that he brings with you. Because I believe Henry in the game, it said, we only take what we need. And then, Sam's kind of super bummed about it. And then Ellie grabs the robot for Sam in the game, but it was played out. It was more fleshed out in the series when they were just able to bond and have a little bit of familiarity before Sam gets bitten during that entire sequence. And that's another big change where Sam doesn't tell anyone that he was bitten on the leg in the game, but he opens up to Ellie because Sam feels comfortable around him. And another change is when Ellie tries to heal Sam or try to reverse the effect because she says, like, my blood is medicine. And I thought that was very powerful because Ellie's like, oh, I have a chance to help someone who is younger than me. And, she wants to see what she can do to see if this works. We all knew it wasn't going to, but it was a very nice gesture. And then Sam asking Ellie to stay awake with him as he turns. And it just, I can't even talk about it. It was crazy.
Pain. Just pain. I think like Ellie cutting her hand, right, and trying, like it goes all the way back to episode 2 where Tess says, save who you can save. And we've talked about how Joel might take that to heart, but also how that affects Ellie as well, right? Because she sees all of this. And all of this is just to get her to the Fireflies and to find Tommy. We know Joel's really just trying to find Tommy. But like, she's seeing how far the world has gone and what these monsters look like especially after seeing that little kid and the bloater that same night. Now knowing what can potentially happen to Sam, I'm sure, that's really going to affect her moving forward. And it makes that moment even more heartbreaking because it now also plants a seed of doubt, right? Like, will this actually work? Will they be able to make some sort of cure, some sort of vaccine from her blood? Or is she just a special case, So
yeah,
it adds a lot. There's a lot of nuance and detail in those final moments with her and Sam. And, just making him younger, I think really drives home how heartbreaking that is. Cause he's like, what, 9, 10, maybe
8. He's like 8 years old in the show. Yeah.
That's brutal.
It just hurts so much.
It does. I mean, I think Mike brings up another excellent point where it's, obviously us knowing where the story goes, but it's also, like you said, is Ellie just a special case when it comes to this world? It's just her genetic makeup and she just is immune, but we won't know until later on. So we have, I think, 4 more episodes left altogether because it's 9 episodes, correct, Mike? I believe so. Mr. Soothsayer over there.
Yeah, I mean, they may give us an extra episode like The Sandman. Who knows?
Yeah, I have yet to watch that as well. I need to watch it. My backlog for everything, it's just been messed up lately. But I think I can probably get that through this weekend. But it depends on how much time I spend with my new mates in Hogwarts Legacy. But I wanted to open it up to you guys. Was there anything else you wanted to mention in our spoiler section before we get into our final thoughts and our ratings?
I wanted to go back to that scene between Ellie and Sam in the bedroom. It's definitely the most heartbreaking because it's actually the part where Troy Baker just kind of got choked up and was breaking down in the podcast when he was talking about it. Because Sam asked Ellie, when he turned into a monster, is it still you inside? Which is just, first of all, it's just an amazing question that kind of just exemplifies the entire show and all the questions they're asking about, like Joel and all these people who have to do these monstrous things. Is it still them inside, or did someone else take over? But then the next morning when they wake up and Ellie asks Sam, or like says his name, and he doesn't react, kind of just showing that it is still him inside because he didn't hear that, which is just a really, really beautiful way of showing that, and heartbreaking in the same time because he's just a kid in there and he is now turned into this monster and there's nothing he can do about it, and he attacks her, and that's when the madness ensues. And then Henry has to make the terrible decision to kill Sam himself before anyone else does, just like in the game. And then he turns the pistol onto himself, and it hurts just as much.
Yeah, and especially when that's playing out. I think Devin brings up a good point when after Sam asks Ellie to stay awake with him, when she, dozes off, because this is like the second time she's dozed off in the in the entire series. She's a very sleepy person. But you see Sam is, he's on the other side of the bed and looking out the window. So yeah, there's definitely, at least during the manifestation of like the infected, there was definitely a part of Sam that was still in there, and him probably just saying, hey, I need to be as far away from Ellie as I possibly can. She says that her blood is medicine, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he kind of picks up the fact that she was immune. But like in the game, it's, he's like standing up, he has the toy, and he's foaming and stuff, attacks Ellie the same way. But when it plays out in the game, it's a little bit longer of a thing, because I think Joel goes to attack Sam in the game, from what I remember when I was replaying it through. Then there's a bit of a back and forth, but here it's just more, we're just gonna let it slide down and let the events take place.
It was pretty similar, actually, the two scenes where Joel pulls out his gun, but then that's the actor's name, but Henry shoots in front of Joel to stop him from doing anything.
Yeah, that was awesome. I love how we have two versions of how things play out. Like, obviously for the video game, it's separate. That is its own thing. But I really love how they're able to make everything feel familiar for gamers, while also giving them something a little bit different in how things play out. Because if you just play out, like motion for motion, beat for beat from the video game to the TV show, and I think I said this a few weeks back, that's not giving the actor any real creative freedom as to be like, oh, well, this is how it's done in the game, but how would I do it for a different type of medium, which I thought was it's always
just like
nice
just
touch.
like Troy Baker said in the beginning, it's evolution, not adaptation.
Right. Yeah. Everyone's gonna be coining that phrase, the gaming evolution.
I also wanted to ask one more thing. This is the part where Eric Voss started to tear up a little bit too. You could tell in his voice, but when they do the burials, and then Ellie puts his writing, I guess it's a toy, his writing toy on top, and it says, "I'm sorry." I wanted to know who you guys think wrote that. Was it Sam or was it Ellie? I mean, it's heartbreaking either way. Like it's completely devastating either way, but it's just so sad to think about.
I'm pretty sure it was Ellie, right? Because she did, like, the same night, she did try to cure him, right? And so, like, she was really hoping that would work. That's how I at least took it. And it clearly didn't. And so I feel like that's her saying I'm sorry to Sam, not the other way around.
You could also take it as Sam saying I'm sorry for about to turn into a monster.
I could definitely see both sides. I think it was Ellie, but more so because she does unfortunately fail and, falls asleep to Sam's transformation. But honestly, I think it can go either way. But I think it would be Ellie just because. But I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I think that
either way, it was just so heartbreaking to see that. And then she also like tied up the pen part so that no one else can write on it.
Oh yeah. I've seen those devices before when I was like younger. It's kind of like forgot the name of it, but I've definitely seen those used before, and I thought that was nice to give him that tool where it's like, oh, he can just kind of rip it up and refresh it, as you could say in IT terms altogether. But yeah, let's get into our final thoughts and our ratings here really quick. Mike, what are your final thoughts and ratings about this episode? Or just final thoughts, honestly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, if it's a rating, it's a 10 out of 10. Perfect. I'm ready to get hurt again next week, to quote Michael Scott. This was a great episode. All the actors are great. I really loved Sam and Henry. Those two actors were phenomenal. I thought the addition of some of the elements from like the Ish storyline, which is like a side collection thing from the video games, played for a really nice lore backdrop once we see where the infected come from, right? Because if you played the games and you got the collectibles and you read those letters, because it's not really a story beat in the game, but if you read those letters, it's telling you the story of this man named Ish who created a safe haven in these tunnels, and that they eventually were able to keep the infected away. But someone leaves the door open, and Joel even acknowledges it by reading the rules on the wall. He's like, well, someone failed to follow all the rules. And an infected gets in and wastes the entire underground community. And so seeing them all emerge, I thought was a really nice touch, because that is a game reference, even though the game itself never shows that happening.
Yeah.
And so that to me is why this is a perfect evolution, as Troy Baker would say, because all of this is still within the Last of Us video game, but they're able to use it narratively to make it shine here in this new form of storytelling. So love this episode.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that explanation as well. Cause that Ish storyline, it's like you said, it's something you have to kind of like look for in the game. And when it comes to, video games, it's the gameplay that keeps the player busy. But, if there are gamers who, want to learn more about those worlds, it's like if you're playing like Bloodborne or like Elden Ring, like those, there's a story there for sure for those games, but it's up to the player to go out of their way to look for more clues and just to be, more immersed in that world. But yeah, Devin, what are your final thoughts on The Last of Us episode 5?
Yeah, I loved it. Like everything Mike said, it's just an amazing episode. I was kind of thinking about possibly one thing one negative I was possibly thinking about this was the Kathleen and Perry storyline being so short. What was it, like a 2-episode arc for them?
Yeah, pretty much.
But then the more I think about it, it's just kind of shows that this show is really keeping everything like tight and concise. Like they're not going to be dragging on for 10 seasons like The Walking Dead did. Like they know the story they're going to tell. They have the games to follow, and they will be following them and then adding more to it as needed. And these kind of short 1-episode, 2-episode arcs for these characters, it's just kind of working perfectly for this world, because it is a cruel world and people die left and right, and that's just how it goes. And I'd say this is definitely a perfect episode, up there with episode 3 for best of the season so far. Neck and neck, I'd say. And it's a great show so far.
Yeah, I pretty much echo everything you guys are saying. It's been a wonderful ride so far. It's very rare when we get a show or just another property that's either adapted from and or based off of a video game where it just takes everyone by surprise. We have like Cyberpunk Edge Runners, and then of course you have Arcane, which Devin still needs to watch, but hey, you know, it is what it is. I keep telling him it is Henry Cavill approved. Henry Cavill was interviewing with this one guy from like the BBC, and he had mentioned it saying, "Oh, you should watch Arcane." And the next time they interview with each other, he asked him if he watched it, and Henry Cavill loved it. So it is Arcane is Henry Cavill approved. So if you haven't watched it,
here's what Devin needs to do. Watch it when season 2 gets announced. How about that? You know, when we get season 2, then
maybe some motivation would help.
Hey, I know the game is. Hey, I'm not a big MOBA gamer myself. When it comes to League of Legends, it's just not my thing. But man, if that story isn't like some of the best I've seen based off of a video game. Like for me, it's definitely up there with The Last of Us, like 100%. Like if I were to recommend 2, it would be The Last of Us and then Arcane, maybe Cyberpunk Edge Runners if you're into like the more animated style thing. But I digress. Yeah, this episode's perfect. Cuphead. Oh yeah, Cuphead's a good one too. I forgot about that. Honestly, Devin's a big fan of the Tomb Raider movie from last time he had told me. So I've never seen it.
No, I think it was forgettable. It was just average.
Oh. Well, I
love the games, but
yeah. Oh, you know, maybe that's what you're talking about. I'm sorry, guys. It's been a long day. It's only 1:00 here. But yeah, with all that said, that concludes our The Last of Us episode 5 review. Again, that is titled Endure and Survive. So if you haven't watched it, definitely go watch it before the Super Bowl and just have a good time with it all together. But I'm going to pass it back over to Mike so he can let everyone know what is coming up on his channel and where you can find him on the internet.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a fantastic conversation. This is a busy week. It's Super Bowl week. Fly Eagles fly, right? We'll see what's going to happen. But
oh boy.
On the chatter after, we're covering The Last of Us on Beyond the Clickers. That's going to be on Wednesday because the Super Bowl has shifted everything and Brandon can't do weekends. So it's going to be a later recording, live stream. Make sure you're there, 8:30. Tuesday, we're going to be live again, reacting to all of the Super Bowl trailers that we're going to be getting. So make sure you stop by, join us. We can watch them together. Brandon's username on all social media platforms is the Scarlet Fan. That's how big of a Flash fan he is. We'll see if he's heartbroken seeing whatever this trailer is going to look like for the Super Bowl. So that's going to be fun.
Oh, we're getting that during the Super Bowl. Okay, that's right. I forgot about that.
We're going to get our first look at Batman Returns again. That's what I call this Flash movie because we're just here for Michael Keaton at this point. But I digress. The amateur
if he's even in it, who knows?
If he's in it, right? Like, it changes so much. Then on the Amateur Otaku, we've got some coverage from Anime Milwaukee, some interviews with the cast of Attack on Titan. So stay tuned for that. That's a fun one. Also, I think we're talking Tomo-chan is a Girl and My Hero Academia this week. We just got into the Dark Deku arc, so that's going to be fun.
Ooh. Sounds interesting, man. Definitely keep a lookout for all of Mike's future endeavors that are coming up on his channels. All of his social links can be found in the episode notes of this episode, as well as every other episode of The Last of Us that he has joined us with on a weekly basis. So that is a wrap on today's episode for us. And if you like what you heard on today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform of choice. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FilmOptix. That is Optix with an X to stay in the know. And you can always share an episode of our podcast with a friend, whether it be your mother, your brother, or your significant other. Make sure to share an episode of the Film Optix podcast with a movie lover in need. And really quick, let's take a sneak peek at what's coming up on the show. So what we have on deck, sorry, I'm all Steam decked up. You can look you can look forward to our Ant-Man Quantumania review that will be dropping the week of Valentine, or the week of February 13th. And then we're also going to be covering Cocaine Bear later on in the month of February. And for what's out right now, you can check out our episode 1 through 4 of The Last of Us that we covered on a weekly basis. You can also check out our Knock at the Cabin review, as well as our That 90s Show and our Velma review that I did, which was a solo episode on my side. Had to say my piece with that and, move on. But definitely check it out if you are interested in any of those episodes. So again, thank you all for listening. And remember, if you enjoy the show, leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram to stay in the know. That was Devin, Mike, signing off. And we'll see you guys in the next one. And remember to endure and survive.